You remember when marketing was fun? When you had time to be creative and connect with your customers? With HubSpot, marketing can be fun again. Turn one piece of content into everything you need, know which prospects are ready to buy, and see all your campaign results in one place. Plus, it's easy to use, helping HubSpot customers double their leads in just 12 months, which means you have more time to, enjoy marketing again. Visit HubSpot.com to get started for free. Good morning and happy Friday. It's March 7th. I'm Jon Weigell here with Rob Litterst and Juliet Bennett, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Renters might be in for a rough ride in the coming years. With housing construction decreasing massively, rent is going to be harder to negotiate in several cities across America for years to come. So why are we facing this problem now, and what areas are really affected in the States? We'll chat about that in a bit, but first, let's give you the news in business and tech. Take it away, Juliet.
Alibaba debuted its newest AI reasoning model, QWQ-32B, claiming it rivals both DeepSeek's R1 and almost entirely surpasses OpenAI O1 Mini, that is OpenAI's most cost-efficient reasoning model. Meanwhile, Manus, another Chinese AI tool available through invite-only preview, claims it can perform real-world tasks, such as generating curricula, itineraries, analyzing things, and that it can also outperform OpenAI's deep research. If you've ever wanted to taste a video game, you may be able to do that. A team of researchers created eTaste, a human-machine interface device that delivers salty, sour, sweet, bitter, and umami chemicals directly into users' mouths. It uses an electromagnetic pump to respond to remote stimuli before sending flavored gels through a tab to the tongue. Now, obviously, one possible use here is that you could taste the food in movies and TV shows and video games. Other potential applications include online shopping, education, physical rehab, weight management, and more. The next two things we're going to talk about involve alcohol. Kraft Heinz is getting in the game. It is not pursuing a ketchup-flavored vodka, although, to be fair, that would be fine in a Bloody Mary. It is, however, launching a Crystal Light Vodka Refreshers hard seltzer line, after estimating that about 20% of the line's customers are already using it as a mixer for drinks anyhow. Now, who will be drinking this? Maybe boomers. Boomers are apparently drinking more than younger people. The percentage of Americans over 55 who say they drink alcohol has increased from 49% in the early 2000s to 59% today, per Gallup data. For those 18 to 34 years old, it actually fell from 72% to 62%. And finally, the forthcoming Monopoly movie, yes, they're making a movie about the board game Monopoly, has tapped writers John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein. This may be interesting to you if you enjoyed one of Hasbro's last game-related movies, Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, because, well, they also wrote that. So we'll see how exciting someone can make a game of Monopoly, a game that is notorious for being very long to play.
Okay, so let's talk about housing. The rent may well get too damn high in the coming years, but there are some big reasons for that. So, Rob, first, can we talk about how rent prices have been just in the past few years?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the big trend here is there is a wave of apartment construction that has been bringing rents down from their pandemic era peak. In 2024 specifically, developers finished the most units nationwide since 1974, which is crazy to think about because where I live in Massachusetts, there's not a lot of room. And you'll see as we kind of get towards the end of the story, where they're actually building. And it makes a lot of sense. It's not in the Northeast.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It is not here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was reading this whole story. This is from Business Insider, by the way. I was reading this whole story thinking to myself, wow, do we have a lot of new developments in New York? And it is certainly not in New York. So
no. And I mean, dude, it's so funny. If you're ever on Twitter and you see, there are a lot of kind of Twitter influencers who run their own real estate businesses and basically will buy out big apartment complexes, build them out, and then continue accumulating all of these apartments. And I'm always wondering, where are these guys? That just seems like it would be so expensive in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like all of these guys that I run across on Twitter are like always in like Ohio or Wisconsin or
Sure.
Nebraska or something like that. Like places where I think like buying an entire apartment complex wouldn't run you like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. These are places where a lot of apartments and land is yet to be developed. So you can actually build these things in those places. But yeah, it seems like with so much construction, rent has gone down. I mean, I'm not saying that as a New Yorker, but generally in the United States, rent has gone down because there's such kind of a high amount of these new high-rise buildings, meaning that the supply and demand are kind of evening out, it sounds like.
Right. And it's getting hard for landlords, which is weird. It kind of feels like the tables have turned. I know a couple of years ago, Zach and I would talk about the state of real estate and the state of buying a home or renting. And it was almost like both of them were equally hard. Rents were going up. It's really hard to find a place. Landlords were making zero concessions and no perks. At the end of 2024, almost 13% of units nationwide were offering concessions, which is pretty close to the all-time highs from the early months of the pandemic when hardly anybody wanted to move and landlords were trying to figure out how to get new people in.
Right.
Developers are projected to deliver another 500,000 new apartments this year, which is down slightly from 2024, but still a lot of new apartments. But as you can see, this kind of impact and evening of supply and demand, as you said, is clearly leading to less construction and it is starting to have an impact on the markets.
Yeah. And the key there is that they're delivering another 500,000 new apartments this year, which means that construction must have started a few years ago. So a lot of construction completion is happening right now, but it seems like not a lot of construction is being started right now. But, before we get to that though, how does 2026 look? I mean, 2025, maybe you could strike a deal here and there. 2024, it seemed like it was way more open and there was way more stuff available for you to negotiate on. But how does next year look?
Definitely. I think the simple answer is more expensive for renters, at least. And RealPage is an American property management software company. They anticipate a steep drop off in availability in new units from 470,000 new units in 2025 to 265,000 in 2026. So you can see how that kind of rate of new units is starting to dwindle a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think like this is just kind of natural to the ebb and flow of supply and demand. Apartment supply boomed over the last few years, but demand kept pace. There aren't a lot of empty units across America. And so, I think this is a pretty natural progression.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Things have kind of turned the other cheek on this because it seems like, as you were saying before, maybe before pre-pandemic, the rent was pretty high. And then pandemic happened, rent got down low a little bit, got chopped a little bit, and now it's kind of on the way back up. As with many things, I feel like in the economy is the ebb and flow of things. But yeah, I would love to know though, why do you think developers are starting to build less? What economic reason would there be for them to stop building as many apartments starting this year, next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is this kind of like evening out of supply and demand and the struggles that developers are already having. But then I think another part of it is more macro, right? Because I think like developers can always find a way to make a buck, it seems like. And if it was just supply and demand, I think developers would figure out ways to figure that out. But I think developers are also running into issues with the Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes over the last few years. Developers rely heavily on debt to finance these new projects, and the interest rate hikes have made those loans a lot more expensive than they used to be, which I think has really kind of like kicked off this downturn in construction.
Yeah, and let's talk about where this is happening. We alluded to it before, and you mentioned like the Midwest a few years ago, like people had all this land to build stuff on out there for not that expensive money-wise. And now this is happening more now in the South. Texas, Atlanta, Phoenix, Houston.
Totally.
So all of these cities in all of these states that are much larger have a lot more land to give. And it seems like the developments are really popping off there or have popped off. I actually have a friend that just moved to Austin.
Nice.
And he was telling me how rent is decreasing in Austin, which I was like, that's crazy and completely unheard of because there are just so many new developments right now and so many new high rises that the supply and the demand have really evened out. But it looks like in the next year, all of these spots that were previously known as places that you could go for more affordable housing may not be that way anymore.
Totally. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Like the construction renaissance really was over-indexed for the South. You mentioned Austin, Atlanta, Phoenix, Houston, classic kind of like Sun Belt, I guess, besides Atlanta being kind of in like the Southern Midwest. And there's a ton of space out there, a ton of land. Austin's obviously gotten super hot. I know Phoenix is growing really fast. Same with Houston. It's not surprising. I think it's really interesting to see like a dynamic like what you just mentioned in Austin, where rents are coming down. I have some friends that live out in Austin too, and they've mentioned the same thing.
Yeah.
It's almost like they built too much too fast. And now they're kind of like seeing the downstream effects of that.
Yeah. But I mean, for renters, for people like me, that's a good thing.
I'll take it.
I'm happy to see renters having the ability to negotiate and renters having the ability to talk to a landlord instead of the landlord saying, hey, this is my price. If you can't pay it, get out. So it's nice to hear, but unfortunately, it looks like the good times will not last and extend to next year and the year after.
Totally.
All right, and that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning in to the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor is Robert Hartwig. Our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a ton more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. If you're not subscribed, go sign up at thehustle.co/email and follow us on Instagram at thehustledaily. We'll see you later.